when one man tried to go to small claims court in Fort Wayne and then realized he wasn't allowed to use the handicap spots in the lot next to the building, he called 15 Finds Out.
Investigator Alyssa Ivinson went to that parking lot and brought ADA experts with her. She joins us now with what she discovered. Alyssa.
Well, the lot next to the courthouse annex building on Superior is for county employees only. So the accessible spots there are employees only too. But that was a big problem for Dan Headlee, who just needed to get to court.
With a cane and oxygen tank, it's not easy for Korean War veteran Dan Headlee to get around.
Never, ever take for granted your ability to breathe freely and to walk. And I can't do that anymore.
That struggle.
And this just put a crimp in it.
Magnified a month ago.
This is where I had to go to court.
He filed a suit in small claims court.
And I came down to check out parking.
At the courthouse annex building off West Superior.
And I met with this. They got handicap parking, but employee only. And I said, how can they make that restriction on a handicap slot? So I called you.
15 Finds Out went to the lot and took Fifth Freedom with us.
It's an unfortunate situation.
Doug Schmidt is the ACT team coordinator for the Disabilities Advocacy Group.
There are no laws being broken.
Schmidt explained that a private lot is not required to offer public accessible parking.
Well, the courthouse serves the public.
Yes.
So they're not required to have adjacent public parking?
They're not required to have adjacent public parking. There's no ADA requirement for maximum distance between parking and the buildings that it serves. If the public parking that you offer is 1,000 miles away from your building, that's where the accessible parking is going to be.
The American Disabilities Act only requires a certain number of accessible spots when and where public parking is provided. It also doesn't have specific rules for on-street parking.
Is this a loophole?
It's kind of an oversight in ADA regulations.
Indiana's regulations for accessible street parking only come into play when public on-street parking already exists, which it doesn't on the annex building's corner.
It would be nice if there were, accessible public parking on this block, but they are in compliance with all the laws and regulations, and they're not required to offer more.
This accessible spot is the only one on the block, and it services several buildings. The next closest is 2 blocks away. There's one more on the street and then a parking garage.
At Fifth Freedom, we would always like to see more done than just the regulations. The laws and regulations are kind of written to be, bare minimum. We consider best practices to be a bit more. That would be entirely up to them, what they wanted to do.
I think it's excessive. At least one of these slots ought to be public. I mean, when I pulled up, this was empty.
Now Dan just hopes the county decides to go above and beyond the law.
It just seemed that there could be a few slots for the people that are doing business here. I know it's okay, it's not required by law, but how about a little common courtesy?
While we were shooting this story, an employee actually came up to us and told us that they see people who need accessible parking to use that building have trouble finding a spot all the time. Well, 15 Finds Out took these concerns to Allen County Commissioner Nelson Peters. Hear his reaction tomorrow at 5.